Let's turn back to politics. Republicans in Congress are gearing up to negotiate an extension of Donald Trump's 2017 tax cuts. A group of House Republicans were invited to meet with Trump this weekend at Mar-a-Lago and are expected to push to include an expansion of SALT tax deductions in Congress's upcoming package. I'm pleased to say that joining us now is one of those House Republicans, Congressman Mike Lawler of New York. Congressman, fantastic to catch up with you once again, sir. I just want to know from your perspective how many friends you have outside of New York in the House that would be on board with this effort.
A lot more than people realize. Obviously, New York, New Jersey, and California, three of the high-tax states where this has most acutely impacted. Certainly, we have a coalition, and given our small majority in the House, it's certainly a powerful coalition. But there's other states and members across the country in which over the last 7 years, they've seen their own taxes rise up against that $10,000 cap. So, quietly, there's a few more members than people would realize. Look, the cap on SALT was a pay-for the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That's it. It was used as a pay-for to pay for other provisions within the tax bill. The $10,000 cap is woefully insufficient. It's had a negative impact on states like New York. Now, we can get into how New York excessively spends. They've increased their state budget by $61 billion in the last 4 years, for instance. That needs to change. But taxpayers should not be penalized by living in a high-tax state. This is double taxation. And for those of my colleagues that say this is somehow a subsidy, the fact is New York contributes more to the federal government than it receives, and more than some of these states in which, my colleagues will claim that they don't want their taxpayers subsidizing New York. But the reality is it's the other way around.
Congressman, you certainly don't have a friend, though, in someone like Lindsey Graham, the senator of South Carolina, who said, why should I, from South Carolina, pay for what's going on in some of these blue states? And he's pushing for this for the two-bill approach, because he doesn't want to talk about taxes. He thinks it's going to take too long, and he doesn't, frankly, want to sign up for SALT. How are you going to convince the president this weekend that you should do one bill together and make sure SALT's included?
Well, respectfully, South Carolina is one of those states that gets more back, certainly percentage-wise, than New York does. So, if we want to talk about subsidies, we can go chapter and verse through everybody's subsidies that they get. Look, with respect to one versus two, the president has already made clear he is moving forward on one big bill. We need to deal with taxes, the border, energy, debt, among other issues. And the fact is, given our small margin in the House, we're going to need everybody's vote and everybody on board. Two track bills are going to make that harder. So while it may take a little bit more time to get one bill negotiated, it is necessary if we're going to get all of these issues addressed. And I think the president understands that. I think that's why the president made clear last week one bill, and that's how we are proceeding forward in the House. And look, ultimately, our Senate and House Republican majorities are going to have to work together. Nobody's going to get everything they want out of this. There's going to have to be a good faith negotiation if we have any chance of passing a reconciliation bill.
I was one of those individuals who watched your Festivus airing of grievances during the Christmas week, and you did a little bit of a wink at your potential future, maybe becoming the governor of New York. To make sure you could potentially go down that path, do you need to secure a higher SALT tax break?
Look, regardless of whether or not I run for governor, this was a promise of mine, and it's a top priority for my district. I represent one of the highest tax districts in the country, inclusive of Westchester and Rockland counties, #1 and #2 highest property tax counties in America. So this is critically important to lift the cap on SALT. $10,000 is woefully insufficient. This is something that I said I would deliver on, and we're going to, as part of this reconciliation bill. Long term for New York, this is critical. We lead the nation in outmigration. Our tax base is eroding in large part because of the disastrous policies of Kathy Hochul and Albany Democrats. One-party rule in Albany has been an abject disaster, whether you're talking about the affordability crisis or public safety, people being burned alive on subways, pushed in front of oncoming subway trains, Kathy Hochul now scamming New Yorkers out of $2,500 a year just for the privilege of driving to work while spending billions of dollars of taxpayer money on free housing, clothing, food, education, and health care for illegal immigrants. New York needs change. There's no question about that. But from a federal perspective, we should not be penalizing New York taxpayers because of the disastrous decisions of Kathy Hochul and Albany Democrats.
And just to be clear, when it comes to the SALT cap, how high are you looking for it to be raised?
Look, I've introduced legislation, my marriage penalty elimination bill reintroduced to raise it to $100,000 for individuals, $200,000 for married couples. This is going to be a negotiation. My colleagues and I are looking forward to sitting down with the president, having a discussion about it, hearing, obviously, what his priorities are as part of the tax bill, and working to a consensus. At the end of the day, my objective is to provide tax relief to hardworking Americans. It's incumbent upon everybody to negotiate in good faith, because here's the reality. If we do not pass a tax bill, number one, SALT comes back unlimited, but it is accompanied by the largest tax increase in American history. So it is important that we actually negotiate a fair tax deal for the American people.
In August, I just want to end on this. You were one of these individuals that wrote a letter to the speaker talking about that you didn't want the repeal of energy tax credits with the IRA. This is something that President-elect Donald Trump wants. Are you going to be trying to assuage him of your view over this weekend in Mar-a-Lago?
Look, many provisions of the IRA absolutely need to be repealed. What we signed on to a letter is that we were not going to just sign off on a wholesale repeal. There needed to be a discussion and, again, a negotiation. Companies make decisions based on tax provisions, and they need certainty. And there's already been significant investment, including in New York, based on some of these energy tax credits. And so we want to make sure that any changes are done smartly and not just wholesale repeal. So that'll be part of the discussion and conversation as we move forward. Again, I think the key here is to come up with a reconciliation bill that increases domestic production of energy, ensures the American people have a good, smart tax bill to reduce their taxes, reduce the cost of living here in the U.S., and ultimately secures our border. It's a lot of important issues that have to be included in this reconciliation bill. It's going to require negotiation, and it's going to ultimately require every Republican supporting the final product.
Congressman, as we speak, bond yields are climbing, and we've seen quite a significant move since September when the Federal Reserve started its rate-cutting effort. We've moved 100 basis points, and I certainly don't expect you to follow the ins and outs of fixed income on any given day, but I wonder whether you and your colleagues are sensitive to some of the pressure that's starting to build in the U.S. debt market.
No question. Look, our debt at $36 trillion total and counting is a major problem. And this is something that everybody in the Republican conference is in agreement on. We have to tackle our debt. We have to reduce our deficit spending. We have to right-size the federal government. Spending is out of control. Joe Biden's disastrous first 2 years gave us record inflation. It spiked the cost of living, and we have to unwind a lot of this. You look at a state like New York, it is floundering because of some of the economic pressures. And just think about this. The MTA has more debt than 80% of the states in the country. So debt is a major problem. It's something that we have to deal with across the board. We cannot continue to print and borrow money at the levels that we have.
Do you think we can afford to extend TCJA, which baseline is something like $4 to $5 trillion? Do you think we can afford to include an expansion of salt tax deductions? And Congressman, I wouldn't push back against anything you said about the effort that needs to take place elsewhere. I'm just wondering how much fiscal space you and your colleagues believe we actually have at the moment.
Look, tax policy is critical to economic growth, but it's one part. We need to increase domestic production of energy, which will help generate more revenues. Energy policy is also critical, not just domestically for cost, but for national security. You were talking, obviously, about the threats to Europe from Russia. Europe is still buying gas from Russia. It's idiotic. It makes no sense that they're helping fund the very war they're trying to stop. So there is a lot that has to be done here, including reining in federal spending. Obviously, as we work through the tax cuts, we will look to help offset some of the cost through spending reductions. So this is going to be a comprehensive approach to how we right-size the American economy. I do think it's possible. It's going to be one of the most critical things any of us ever do in our careers in government. And so we all have to be committed to the final cause here.